Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
Who's more powerful, the President of the United States or the American consumer?
Who's more powerful, American consumers or President Biden?
I'll let you know in November.
Believe it or not, the Associated Press ran a story in which Claudia Sahm, founder of Sahm Consulting and a former Fed economist, concludes the whole story with, quote, consumers are more powerful than President Biden. Why do you want to add no kidding to the end of that article? That American consumers are more powerful than the president. What kind of mindset do we have in this country that people think that the president of the United States, no matter who he is or she is, dictates the reality of the economy, as opposed to American consumers? I mean, that little tiny sentence at the end of this really fascinating article tells the whole story of the distortion of the way the American unibrow media covers the economy, like it all is driven by the top. How absurd.
Yeah, and we have talked about this on several occasions. I think she says it quite eloquently and to the point, and it can't be topped. And shocking, AP would use the quotes, and the way they manufacture the entire story with real prices in real time that really matter to people, unlike the media, unlike the administration. I've always said it this way. The biggest problem for Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or anyone else of that worldview and economic policy view is that there's the most effective, think of it like the most effective Super Bowl ad in history that airs every time somebody fills up their gas tank, every time they go to the grocery store. I always laugh and I think of you. In fact, Aaron Reel on your morning show with me, we talked about you in that. You always bring up potato chips. It must have been something about Doritos or whatever it was that was the straw that broke the camel's back for you. Me, I'll always think of a pot roast that I held in my hand that was $64, and I literally put it back. I'll always remember that from this era. But everybody has something that they relate to, and it's because on average, everything's 19% higher still than it was prior to COVID. And that's a terrible, effective commercial against the Democrats every single day when somebody's at the grocery store, the gas station, or worst of all, at a restaurant.
Okay, so let's think about this. So one of the genius moves of the COVID warriors was shut down the government, because it's like a V-shaped economy. You can flip it on and off like a switch, have the government send everybody checks, and then we'll turn the economy back on when it's healthy again, and we'll all just be fine. Yeah, we'll be more in debt. We realize that. That's going to cost us probably $1 trillion, but we can handle another $1 trillion to save people's lives. That was the junior high school logic that was involved in all of this, driven by fear and who knows what else.
Well, that was the narrative. I think the reality was stay home, stay safe. This is the new normal. Somebody had a more sinister plan to make this the new normal.
So what ends up happening is prices go off the charts. They skyrocket. Inflation is up close to 20% from where we were during COVID. What's that look like? This AP article is a blast. It says, it gets into specifics. A 24-pack of Kraft single cheese slices is $7.69. The store label, the off-brand, $2.99. A 32-ounce Heinz ketchup bottle is $6.29. The alternative is just $1.69. Similar gaps existed with mac and cheese and shredded cheese products. Just those 5 products together already cost nearly $30, the article says. The alternatives were less than half that, about $13. What does that tell you about how American business seized upon the window of opportunity of the heavy hand of government coming in and playing games, and businesses jumped on top of that caravan? Then the president of the United States decides that he's going to do a war on energy in America, and that skyrockets every other set of prices that you could imagine in this country. It's like when we did the 28 show on Christmas in America on the Great Depression, the year before the Great Depression and the Great Depression. And basically, after years of research, the Great Depression is something we did to ourselves. We've done all this stuff to ourselves. Like, we're looking for who's the boogeyman in all of this. No, the American government, facilitated by the United States Congress, which is Republicans and Democrats, supporting all of this nonsensical economic trash, has driven us to the place where we're having to count slices of cheese in the grocery store.
I was struck at Christmas in America thinking, wow, and this time starting at $34 trillion in debt, turning to lottery, sports, and casino gaming, we head into the same roll the dice, get rich quick gambling schemes of pre-depression with the softest generation in human, not American history. And we're playing games with the next depression.
Yeah. And facing on the other side of that, adversaries in international global politics that are tough as nails and want to see us disappear from the face of the earth. This is not looking really good. And I can't stand it when the conversations that we have focus on so much of what's wrong. But the insight in this is that this whole inflation boogeyman, they're trying to tell us now, the experts are trying to tell us, well, you should be greatly encouraged. Inflation's like 3%, it's 2%. And I go, 2% of what?
Yeah, you can't feel it. So we had this conversation on your morning shows. So what the cause, number one, out of control spending. And then marketing, monkeying around with the natural consumer supply and demand forces. And so government interjects itself and then it creates the problem and then others seize upon the problem. So we know what the cause is. They don't stop spending. So the Fed jumps in and raises interest rates to cool down spending. Well, it cools down our spending because we're already having a hard time affording inflation. It doesn't take much, but the government doesn't cool its spending. So the interest rates stay. The wages are not increasing with the inflation.
They can't compete.
And then even if you correct it, or as they're trying to tell you they're correcting it, it never goes back down to where it was when it began to rise. That's why it looks so different from 1990. That's why it looks so different from 1970. That's why someday somebody's going to look at our gas prices and our cheese prices and our Dorito prices and our home prices and our car prices and probably snicker. You mean you got a truck for 90 grand then? So you want to play this inflation game? Well, you got to have the salaries increasing with it. What's dangerous is it's not coming back down. So everything's up 19% from COVID, down 3% in terms of inflation, but you're not back to square one and zero, but your wages are still down there. And now everybody has been paying for inflation with debt. Now debt is maxed out. Inflation is being sold to people as it's only at 3%, but it's not back to where it was prior to COVID, and nobody's feeling it and wages are not rising. So, that's a tone deafness. Then you get into shrinkation. Then you get into who to blame. Is it the stores? Is it the brands that are fleecing us? But who started it all? And what can we learn from that so we never do it again? Seems to be what I would like to see the most. And I don't hear a lot of people saying it. I guess because they don't want to get their arms around it. Did that make sense?
Of course it makes sense.
Okay.
In other words, I was paying $1. Now I'm paying $1.20. But guess what? Inflation off that $1.20 is only at 3%. Okay, but we're not going back to $1. We're never going back to $1.
Right.
That's the problem. Now, that also impacts our income tax. People don't realize that you now have bracket creep. Now, there are certain levers inside the federal taxation system that are supposed to adjust with bracket creep, but they can't. Those elements can't possibly correspond to a 20% jump and then 3%
Medicare doesn't. Medicare doesn't adjust. Social Security doesn't adjust. In fact, Social Security increases how much of your total income every year that they will tax. So that's actually growing. That's less money. What we pay for insurance goes
People don't
up.
realize inflation is a way in which the federal treasury grows.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Oops.
When the wages catch up. When the wages catch up. So I used to tell this story. It would be so foolish of me to go to bed tonight, David, and think I was more successful than my father. Now, I have made more money in the last 3 years than my father probably made over 30 years in his career. But that doesn't make me more successful. In fact, when my dad in 1980 signed a contract for $250,000 at Q101 in Chicago for 2 years, that's worth way more than what I'm making today.
All right, so 1980?
Yeah.
That's going to be at least the equivalent of a $500,000 contract today.
But what's the difference? I don't have a $500,000 today. And now I make what Dad made in a single year. Who's living better? My dad in 1980 or the federal government with what they take from me? There's your point right there. Inflation as it grows, and when wages catch up and start growing, it's always more taxes. It's more that goes into Social Security. It's more that goes into Medicare. It's more that goes into the federal income tax brackets. Yes, they grow. That's why Kennedy viewed all this from the opposite angle. First, it's your money. It belongs to you, not the government. Secondly, we trust how you spend it. Third, you grow the economy, and that's how you pay for government. You don't grow government and then find a way to pay for it at the expense of the economy. So, this is all economics 101. It's the economy, stupid. But what I think is interesting for our conversation is clearly the Biden administration caused it with some help from the Trump administration before it. They don't get it. They want to blame companies now. They want to tell people everything's fine. People know everything isn't fine, but they don't know why it isn't fine. They don't know everything we've just said in the first 11 minutes. So they feel it, but they don't know it to prevent it from ever happening again.
When you subscribe to 1850 Main Street, you're the first to find out what's happening next with new guests, publications, and events. And when you spread the word about 1850 Main Street, you're helping others find real answers to the real questions facing America right now. To learn more, visit 1850mainstreet.com. And please, tell a friend.
The economy is like chasing Bigfoot. For most people, and I'm not saying people are stupid, I'm saying no, people are not stupid. It's just that we are so poorly trained that we think that the economy is something that's elusive and that we chase perpetually around the world, that it's out there and it like has a life and an agency of its own. And sometimes it gets sick and sometimes it's better. The economy is nothing more than the accumulated results of the decisions that American consumers make every single day.
Collectively.
That's what the economy is.
Individually, it translates to a collective scoreboard.
Yes.
And that's why when we look at, I have had I'll never forget, I was reading one day and somebody wrote an article, are you really better off with two incomes? Now, we overthink everything in the media. That's the only headline you need. Are you really better off with two incomes as a family?
What a great question.
And so I start reading. And then the guy's like, well, here's some things you don't think about. I'll bet you all think about, and I'm going to throw just some numbers because I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. You make $60,000, your wife makes $30,000. I realize it could be the wife making 60, the husband making 30, or vice versa. You could both be making 150, whatever. It doesn't matter. But just to make it simple in 60-40. One makes 60,000, one makes 40. All you think about is the 60 and the 40 and the 100 together. But you don't think about two cars, both with insurance, both that have to pay to park at their office in some cases, the dry cleaning, the breakfasts and the coffees and the lunches. And then, you're both doing jobs, so you tend to eat out more. Who wants to come home and cook? Yeah, you don't want to clean, so you get a maid. Then you got dry cleaning. When it's all said and done, this guy scientifically, and then gives you the worksheet to do it for yourself, proves you're going to love this punchline. The only one that gains from a two-family both working is the federal government, not you. They are the big winner in that scenario. You're the big break even.
The thing that was left out of that list, and I'm sure it wasn't left out of the article, childcare. Childcare. And that doesn't include the ramifications of the education deficit that is real when you have a full-time parent in the house that is able to help teach children around the school experience. How much learning happens when a kid comes home from school and there's a parent there, and that's when the debrief goes on. That's when the assistant goes on. That's when the homework. You ask any school teacher Which kid's got a better chance of staying current in the reading levels,
Well,
etc.?
without
Two
saying.
working parents, one parent at home. Come on.
They probably wouldn't want to answer that. You'd be lucky to get a straight answer. I can tell you this. People always think of it in terms of public school versus private school or outside education versus homeschooling. I got news for you. Whether you pick public school or private school, you need homeschooling because they don't come home. It's not even like in 1982 when I was in school, let alone when my parents were in school. It's only partially taught at school, and there's no accountability to keep you on the line like a parent. But just the pure formula of that notion, you think you're doing better with you both working. You're about netting even, and unless it's in a really extraordinary circumstance, and that didn't exist in my house, and I was a radio personality, my wife was an attorney, and it didn't bear out on the worksheet. I encourage everybody to do something like that. But yeah, that's how the government grows, and the government grows far more than you through inflation.
Now, this is going to sound...
Because you're getting the same stuff for twice the price.
Someone's going to accuse me of demagoguery or some really bad term when I say it this way. The reality is the economy is not Bigfoot. The economy is us making choices in the consumer reality. The reality of inflation is this. We're all counting slices of cheese at the grocery store now. We're all limiting travel because of costs. We're all flying less because even though you've got discount airlines, it costs you $200 to fly your bags. I mean, how stupid do they think we are?
How many people don't go to restaurants, David, because think about the tip.
Wait a second. I got to finish the point. And the point is this. The people in Washington, D.C., in the House and the Senate, are not diminished in their lifestyle. All the rest of us are. The people inside the Club of 100, those senators, they're not counting slices of cheese. They don't even know what the cheese costs. We're counting the slices because their income is first dollar, it's guaranteed, and their lifestyle is not altered. That's the reality.
And they have a pension waiting for them.
Yeah.
Not that they leave to enjoy it. They usually stay till they die. I was just going to say, when you think of a steak that's now $50 a la carte that used to be $20, and then you figure the tip, I don't understand why we're having a hard time getting waiters and waitresses because the tips are inflated. But I was going to use that as an example. What the tip has grown to is very similar to what taxes grow to. And either way, you're broke.
But who can afford to tip? Furthermore, and there was a brief period of time, like coming out of COVID and through COVID, it was almost like a time where the restaurants hadn't been able to catch up yet. And so it was almost sometimes you sit down and calculate and go, this was a really nice meal. And I probably... maybe it cost me $5 more than at the grocery store. I saved my time. Not any longer.
No.
I mean, you can get in restaurants now. A restaurant cup of coffee costing you $7 for a cup of coffee. I mean, what?
Well, I can tell you where we're at in our home. Restaurants are going to start really feeling it because we're going to stop going. We had to. We're starting to cook more at home, and we're starting to make different choices. There are certain things that I'm very loyal to and I can't break. There are some things I'm not that loyal to. There are some things that I've been pleasantly surprised that whether it's a Kroger brand, Publix brand, I don't want to give anybody a plug. You'll find certain things they do just as well or better. You can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
And you can save $5 couponing. But I mean, I think we've got to find ways to set, and we got to get the government out of meddling in the economy, forcing electric cars or sending everybody home in quarantine and sending everybody checks that get us further in debt. But I think by and large now, just being smart consumers will send clear messages to government and companies, set things in motion, I guess, if correct.
So this article says consumers are more powerful than President Biden. Consumers are more powerful than anybody in Congress, anybody on Capitol Hill, anybody in the White House, more powerful than the Supreme Court. Maybe what we ought to figure out is how, as voters, we can send a message to these people that this has got to be the end. I mean, think about this. Everybody in Washington agreed to send everybody money and send them home. So what did the American consumers do? The research shows, and I heard this on your morning show, by the way, that's your morning show. I heard that what Americans did with that money was they paid down debt. Very smart. Then, after all the inflationary realities of sending all that money out there and everything else the government was doing in increased spending, inflation started to skyrocket. Companies jumped on the bandwagon. The next thing you know, we're counting slices of cheese. You know what American consumers then did? They jacked up their credit card debt to keep up. Now, wouldn't we have been better off to not even start that craziness, if you think about it?
Well, I don't want to, you're going to yell at me for saying this, but we were saying that when they were doing it. I'm going to make a statement right now.
Oh, you almost got fired for saying it.
There, you said it and I didn't.
Yeah, you almost got fired when you were working for some other radio company. Right.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Our founding fathers risked their lives and wealth and livelihood, and you can be bought for $1,500?
Yeah.
You think liberty and freedom is worth $1,500? And I remember you saying things live on the air with me like, well, Michael, this will be interesting if you can flip off a light switch that is the economy and then flip it right back on and it'll come back.
We had people from the illustrious Heritage Foundation making comments about the light switch economy. I almost jumped through the microphone. You got to be kidding me.
In real time, we were talking about COVID and we were saying, well, a mask is a mask if it's the right kind of mask, if it's worn by the sick, if it's handled properly, disposed of properly, made of the right material. A vaccine makes sense for this small group, not so much for this big group. There is no liability, so here's the risk you're having to manage. We did COVID as a virus. A virus is a virus. You don't defeat it. You learn to live with it. I mean, we did all this in real time. I mean, I'm not looking for a pat on the back. I'm just saying we saw all this coming. So here we sit now in late February of another presidential election, and you still have COVID, plus inflation, plus stagnant wages, plus record deficit and debt equals what?
And you still have
don't have any rising premiums and insurance costs. By the way, 2023 and 24 will go down. This is the most under the carpet, under the table thing. Nobody knows what's happened with auto insurance.
Yeah.
Auto insurance has nearly doubled nationwide. You're getting sucked from every direction with the same stagnant wage. Your debt is piled up. So now just the minimum payments are suffocating you. America is starting to fall behind. Let me tell you something. If the consumers are more powerful than the president, then there's going to be a new president and there's going to be some changes. The problem is, you're going to hate this, David, so hang for it. The problem is, if it's Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, both of them are equally to blame for the dilemma you're in. So how can either of them be the hope of getting out of it?
My only hope is that there'll be enough people running for Congress in the House and the Senate that are willing to come to terms with what their constituents are going through. And Michael, I'm not highly optimistic in this first go around. This is probably going to take 2, 3, or 4 election cycles. But and we've lived through the Tea Party. We've lived through the different permutations of citizen revolt that basically got eaten up by one political party or the next. I'm telling you right now, we have got to have a fundamental change among politicians in regards to what they believe the right role of government is, and who are willing to get their hands out of people's pocketbooks. I don't care what party they're in. We got to get people elected who will leave their hands in their own pockets.
I always say the two questions, you're never going to get the right answer unless you ask the right question. The two most important questions never asked. What is the proper size and role of government? Shut up and wait for everybody to answer. And then what is the proper role and responsibility of the self-governed, if self-governed even exists? The two questions that are never discussed, and the answers to which would either be the consequence of what you deserve or what I think is the restoration. Bottom line to this topic is, though, you don't see any correction of inflation. Are you seeing easing? Yes. Lowering? No. And nowhere near, nor will it ever return to where it was prior to COVID. And the wages are stagnant to pay for it all. We'll find out who's more powerful. I'll let you know in November. Or who's dumber.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.